the girlfriend of the Las Vegas shooter, arriving back in the U.S. overnight.
Police released brand new body cam footage showing their frantic search for the shooter.
We are getting a look into the hotel room itself, from which the gunman carried out the deadliest shooting in modern American history.
What was his intention? What was the plotting and planning? And was it indeed him alone?
They raided the house or finished cleaning up the house in Reno, Nevada. And what did they find? They found another cache of weapons.
47 firearms have been recovered. These firearms were recovered from 3 different locations.
He had no digital footprint that they've discovered yet. He literally came out of nowhere.
Here in Las Vegas, President Trump will be arriving later today. He is expected to meet with some of the survivors at the hospitals.
It was the wings of angels. There were so many people that weren't wearing a gun and a badge and a fire uniform that came from nowhere to help.
This is a Fox News alert. The girlfriend of the Las Vegas shooter arriving back here in the United States overnight.
Yeah, she's here, man. She's going to have to answer a lot of questions. Mary Lou Danley, returning from the Philippines, greeted by FBI agents who she was already talking to after landing in Los Angeles.
She is again considered a person of interest as police and the FBI are trying to figure out what led the killer, her boyfriend, to commit the deadliest mass shooting in modern American history.
They also want to know what Danley knew as her family speaks out, saying the gunman sent her away so he could launch his attack. But that's their perspective. Maybe they're covering for their sister.
And all of this is happening as we're awaiting the president to depart from Joint Base Andrews to Las Vegas, where he will meet with victims and families and first responders. And that's where we find Steve. He is in Las Vegas, where the president is heading. Steve?
That's right, Ainsley. The folks here in Las Vegas are really thankful that the president is heading out. There was some question whether or not he would be able to make it because, of course, famously, he was scheduled to go to Puerto Rico yesterday, which he did, and now he's flying directly here from Washington, D.C. And you know what? This is a town that needs the president. They need to hear from him. At this point, we still don't know the motivation. There aren't a lot of answers why that guy did it, but nonetheless, it's a time of national mourning, and it's great that the president is heading this way.
You know, Steve, I think we need to go through some of the stories that we have learned overnight to share with our viewers, who this lady is, who the girlfriend is, and who this man was. Yep. We've heard so many eerie stories about his personality. You heard from the Starbucks guy who said that he berated her in public. It happened a lot, he said, when she asked to use his casino card to buy something. He said he would glare down at her with a mean attitude. You don't need my casino card for this. I'm paying for your drink just like I'm paying for you. She softly said okay, stepped behind him.
Right, and you know, multiple workers at Starbucks said that that's where they treated him. They constantly came in. The president's already called the gunman demented and a very, very sick individual, but I imagine most of the things he's going to be doing is consoling those who have been hit directly and indirectly by the attack. But what else do we know about him? We know he had a total of 47 weapons if you look at all 3 locations. We know that he sent tens of thousands of dollars to the Philippines, and last week about $100,000. But Steve, no one's saying it went directly to this woman.
That's right. All we know is that the money was wired to the Philippines. We don't know whose account it was wired to. And so that opens up a lot of questions. You know, when you look at the guy's background, we knew that he had been apparently a prolific gambler here in Las Vegas, and he made some money when he was working in the insurance industry as well. But apparently in his background, for a while, he worked for the IRS, he worked for the Postal Service, but perhaps obviously the thing he'll be known for the most is what he did back there on the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay Hotel. But the precision with which he put it all together, it clearly was premeditated. He checked in. Now we're hearing apparently he came in on September 27th. Brian Tully, our producer, just showed us there is now online some of his receipts from room service. So he was buying things back in his 2-bedroom suite early. But you look at the family of the woman, the girlfriend. They talked actually to Australian television, and this is what they said about the relationship with him and her.
He sent her away so that he can plan what he's planning without interruptions. In that sense, I thank him for sparing my sister's life, But that won't be to compensate 59 people life. No one can put the puzzles together. No one except Mary Lou, because Steve is not here to talk anymore. Only Mary Lou can maybe help.
And Ainsley, just want to say, in 2012 and 2013, there are pictures now emerging and verified of them both in the Philippines together. We do know that, according to the brother, that he liked to take cruises. And if you talk to the CIA, now they have to go and reconstruct and follow all those pathways to see if there's anything there.
You know what this tells me, Steve and Brian? It tells me there are a lot of people in the Philippines that come here to America to work and they send money back home. And usually, if they're here illegally, they can't go back and forth. They go without seeing their kids for 5 years, whatever. Right. This tells me that she probably is a citizen or has some sort of a work visa to come back and forth. Also, maybe he's wiring money over there to help her extended family. Her sisters live in Australia. She also has a citizenship in Australia, but hasn't lived there in 20 years, we're learning. But the sisters, when at first they say he sent her away so he could plan this massacre, that sounds to me like she knew about it. But then they go on to say that she didn't know anything, that he told her, I'm sending you back to the Philippines. I found a cheap ticket for you, send her away. And she didn't know anything, the sisters say, Steve.
That's right. And just one other tidbit from his family. His brother, Eric, told reporters yesterday they hope that during the autopsy they find that he had a brain tumor. And that would be the only way they could explain what had happened.
Meanwhile,
just less than a mile away from where I am right now is Adam Housley. Adam is going to tell us what the authorities are now releasing regarding what they found inside the room.
Yeah, Steve, you mentioned his brother quickly before we get to the room. I do know from speaking with our contacts that there is some question about some of the statements that the brother has made, and that there may be some misstatements in there. So, of course, that's as this all goes forward. Back to his actual planning process. Well, I'm told they believe he was planning at least 2 to 2.5 months before this attack. And in that room, of course, was a massive amount of weapons. We'll get to that in a moment. First of all, you could tell the massive amount of weapons, and you could hear about what was going on just from the body cam video that was released yesterday by the Sheriff's Department here. There were tactical teams that arrived on scene here from all over. I met one member of one of the tactical teams who was actually off that day. He was called in, grabbed his helmet, grabbed his gear, got here on the ground. We saw several tactical teams working where we are right now on that brutal night. And then this video is just, you don't have to say anything, just take a listen.
Hit my head. Hey, go that way, go that way, go that way. Hey, they're shooting right at us, guys. Everybody stay down. Stay down. Where's it at? North of the Mandalay Bay. It's coming out of a window.
Get back! Get back! Again, part of that video, too, you might want to notice that you'll see parts of the hotel from the Mandalay Bay. It'll appear there's flashes coming from what would be the east side. That's far from where his room was, and it might explain why there's some theories out there that there may have been more than one gunman, which right now police insist that is not the case. Take a look at some of the firearms inside the room as well. I know the sheriff here is very upset that got out. One of his tactical teams was there, and they were the only team inside that room. They believe that's where these photos came from, and you can bet there's an internal investigation going on right now as to how these came out. But it shows the firepower that this man had. I'm told by one weapons expert with one of the federal agencies that in order to shoot and understand these weapons, he would have had to basically practice for a couple of months just because they were so different. And guys, there's a lot of information we're still learning. There's a lot of investigations still to do, and they are hoping that Mary Lou Danley can help with that. Again, right now, she's just a person of interest. She is not in custody, but she has been helpful so far.
And of course, Professor Dercher was saying one of the reasons to do that is to not get her back up so she doesn't get a lawyer, so they get as much information as possible before this becomes a legal situation. Thanks, Adam.
Absolutely.
Yes, Steve, we know we've been reading this morning about Jason Aldean and how he's speaking out to the country. He was on the stage singing during this massacre. He ran off the stage, and he has posted something on Instagram. He says, something has changed in this country and in this world lately that is scary to see. This world is becoming the kind of place I am afraid to raise my children in. At the end of the day, we aren't Democrats or Republicans, whites or blacks, men or women. We are all humans, and we are all Americans, and it's time to start acting like it and stand together as one, says the man who is having his first child soon. His wife, Brittany, is pregnant. Actually, he has two daughters from another marriage, I think.
And Jason mentioned there's something changing in this country. There's something changing a little bit here in Las Vegas. Yesterday, the Wynn Hotel, which is not far from where I'm standing, they started doing some bag checks as people were checking in, looking through bags, make sure they didn't have something they shouldn't have. And also, they started doing with the metal detector wanding people. It took an additional 10 minutes per customer to get in the hotel, but it made them feel a little safer. Meanwhile, there's just one other person who has been talking to the press, and it's a veteran by the name of CHRİS Bethel. His hotel room, he was actually up in the Mandalay Bay that night. He called the police because his hotel room was directly below the gunman. And he's angry, and he would like some answers because and this is one of the reasons the sheriff yesterday was talking about response time, is because he said, I gave the police exactly the location of the shooter, and it took over an hour for the raid. And in fact, the team was waiting for 24 minutes. So he would like some answers, and that's why the local police here are feeling the heat to try to explain the response time. They did it yesterday. It seemed to make a lot of sense to me, but I'm not in law enforcement, and you know, people weren't shooting at me. So I'm sure they've got a really good reason, but nonetheless, that vet would like some answers.
Because 9 minutes of shooting, the security guard gets there, he gets shot through the door. For some reason, the gunman thought it was over, so he killed himself. But 72 minutes later is when they bust in the door, and in the end, they didn't wait for SWAT. But I saw a sheriff last night be somewhat defensive and a little angry when people started criticizing their response. And then he rolled some of the body camera footage to talk about that. I just want to bring up something else. They're trying to find everything possible in terms of video. They actually found the video that Stephen Paddock claimed sued the hotel for when he evidently fell and he claimed hurt himself and hurt his leg. That video's now out there. So when these officers says we know of him locally, I guess they know of him because he's a big gambler, been around, and he's actually sued a hotel.
Yeah, he sued the Cosmopolitan Hotel in Vegas for $100,000, said his medical bills were $32,000, and the rest he needed for pain and suffering. He lost that lawsuit, and now he owes the courts $270 and still never paid that.
All right. We're still trying to find out a lot more. Meanwhile, 12 minutes after the hour, Democrats ramping up an all-out assault on the Second Amendment. For example,
too many Republicans in Congress have tried to enact the dream agenda of the NRA and the gun lobby.
There's a lot of Democrats, too, by the way. Tell that to Joe Manchin. Former press secretary for the vice president, Mark Lotter, reacts to the new cries for gun control. That's next.
Then Geraldo, one-on-one with the president down in Puerto Rico. How will he help the island rebuild after the hurricane? That interview straight ahead. A Fox News alert. President Trump arriving now at Joint Base Andrews, set to depart for Las Vegas, where he will visit the first responders and the families and survivors days after that horrible massacre. And ahead of his visit, Democrats wasting no time calling for gun control.
Mark Lotter is the former press secretary for Vice President Pence, and he joins us now to react. Mark, we have the intensity of the events right now are beyond description. So we have a massacre like we haven't seen in this country. Meanwhile, you have a verbal spat between one Puerto Rican politician and the President of the United States over the weekend. The President goes there yesterday. What should be the tone today?
Well, I think what you'll see right now is the tone is going to be one of consoling those who've been victimized by this terror attack, and also you're going to see the president talk about the remarkable spirit of the American people that were actually responding, helping, throwing their bodies in front of other complete strangers, which is the American way. We always come together in times of tragedy and times of need.
Marcus, the president was leaving the White House and getting on Marine One that we see here that has just landed at Joint Base Andrews. He'll get off of this helicopter and then go onto Air Force One and fly over to Las Vegas. But when he was on the White House lawn, he looked at the cameras and he said, it's a sad day for me personally. I'm going to pay respects and I'm going to see the police. Meanwhile, you have the Democrats that, of course, are so sorry for the people that died, but they're really pushing gun control. You have Steve Scalise, who was shot, playing baseball, and he's saying he wants more gun rights. He's not for more gun control, even though he's a victim of this. What does the vice president say?
Well, I think what you're going to see from the administration is that now's not the time to be having that discussion. And it's a false choice that we have to choose between public safety and our constitutional freedoms. That's what the Democrats want to do. That's why they're politicizing this. This is straight out of their playbook. You don't see Democrats rushing to ban knives when a terrorist uses a knife.
But don't they have a point, though, when you're talking about changing a semi-automatic into an automatic?
We need to look at all the information, and that's the thing that really is we need to take the time. We need to make sure that police can do their work to find out exactly what was used, how was it obtained, and what laws that may already currently be in place can be better enforced before we jump into taking away people's constitutional rights.
I mean, people say, okay, we got to get on top of universal background checks. That wouldn't have been a problem. We have to get people from buying illegal guns. That wasn't a problem. So there was nothing that alerted. He has to find out if this guy had anything in his background that indicated mental illness. That wasn't a problem in this case. So everything people are saying, it's an emotional reaction, but sadly I think it's one to get over politically on other people. So I want to bring you what Thomas Friedman wrote. He said, if only he had shouted Allah Akbar before he opened fire, no one would be telling us to dishonor the victims and stop politicizing. Do you think that's appropriate?
Well, again, we need to figure out what the details are, and I know a lot of people are rushing out there and saying things, and obviously, that'll help get some play and get some coverage in the national media. But what the president is focused on, what the vice president is focused on, is making sure that we are there for the first responders, for the victims, showing them the support of the entire nation as we rally around them. You see people going to blood drives.
There he is, Mark.
The vice president was donating blood yesterday in the Phoenix area. As we look at the president coming, off of Marine One, getting ready to board Air Force One, I mean, his message is going to be one of support. And now is not the time to be politicizing these actions. It's for us to get to the bottom of what was actually happening.
You're looking at a live picture of the president walking over to Air Force One to go to Las Vegas. And, of course, we'll take that live when he's there.
Right. And, Mark, communication matters so much, getting the message out, being effective. Have they done things on the ground right now to make the president optimize this visit?
Oh, absolutely. There have been talks, that have been going on throughout this entire process, and really this is one where the president will, you'll see that human side.
Geraldo Rivera spoke to the president yesterday. You'll get that exclusive interview in a matter of moments as the president boards Air Force One. Back in a moment, Fox and Friends.
A Fox News alert. President Trump just about to take off for Las Vegas from Joint Base Andrews.
A place he's very familiar with. Geraldo Rivera, the president's got his stakes in a lot of different places in this world, but few are as special to him as Las Vegas, Nevada, where he has properties and he knows a lot of the high-flying, real rich guys that own buildings, right?
I was thinking of a slightly different terms, Brian. I was thinking as I watched the first couple, leave Marine One and make their way to Air Force One, that, we live in a crazy, chaotic, conflicted world. And one of the biggest jobs of the President of the United States and the First Lady are they're the comforter-in-chief. And you've got all of these disasters and catastrophes competing for center stage. And imagine the emotional toll it takes. And I was so worried yesterday that the president, because of what happened in Las Vegas, would, with the First Lady, go there or go there first because of the magnitude of that horror, the worst mass shooting in our history. But he decided to stick it out. He went to Puerto Rico, and the Puerto Rican people were very, very grateful. Whatever you read in the so-called fake news, you can ask me about some specific examples maybe later on. I think the President and the First Lady were amazingly gracious and graciously received by the grateful Puerto Rican people. Here is my interview with the President.
Many people feared that because of the awful tragedy in Vegas, you would be diverted. You came anyway. Why?
Well, they're special people, and as you know, I know many people from Puerto Rico. I come from a place called New York, and I love the Puerto Rican people. I also know the island very well. I've been here many times, and we have to help. and we've done a fantastic job. This was a very tough one. You know, I say we got an A+ in Texas, we got an A+ in Florida, and we may have done our best work here, but it hasn't been appreciated. But actually, if you'd see over the last couple of days, now people are really seeing what we've done. The runways are open, the ships are pouring in, and a lot of things are happening, so it's great.
On that note of not being appreciated, I noticed the mayor of San Juan, Mayor Yulín, in the crowd. She's the probable Democratic candidate for governor in 2020. She did not applaud. Welcome to the bitter partisan politics of Puerto Rico. How do you feel? You've been blamed for everything from kids dying to a cholera epidemic that didn't exist.
Well, I don't know the mayor, but she was very, very nice at the very beginning. She said it's incredible what happened, and then all of a sudden I noticed she went a little bit on the nasty side, and I said, I guess she's running for office, and it turns out I was right. See, isn't that a shock? But I will say your current governor, he's been amazing. Your congresswoman has been absolutely amazing, and the people, I met your state senators and lots of other people, and they've been so thankful, and I think virtually every mayor has been so thankful. I've met many of them this morning, the job we've done, and it's the job of the Navy and the Army and the Air Force, the Marines, the whole thing. I mean, it's incredible.
Will we see a Trump plan to rebuild this poor island?
Well, we're going to help the people. You know, look, this had a lot of problems and a lot of debt. They had $72 billion in debt before the hurricanes hit, and they had a power plant that didn't work before the hurricane. So we're going to help them. We're going to do something, and we're going to get it back on its feet.
To what extent do you commit to help rebuild this battered place?
Well, we're going to work something out. We have to look at their whole debt structure. You know, they owe a lot of money to your friends on Wall Street, and we're going to have to wipe that out. That's going to have to be, you know, you can say goodbye to that. I don't know if it's Goldman Sachs, but whoever it is, you can wave goodbye to that. We have to do something about, because the debt was massive on the island. And
my Aunt Ellie doesn't care about that. She wants some help, and so she wants to hear from you.
We are going to help the people out. We're going to get the electric going again. You know, that was a complete wipeout. That wasn't like a couple of poles came down. That was generating plants. That was a lot of very valuable equipment. But it was equipment in bad shape, but we're going to put it in good shape.
The president is understating how bad it was. The power grid is antiquated, it was poorly maintained, it was corruptly managed, and the power agency alone is $6 billion in debt and bankrupt. So Puerto Rico has a long way to go, and the United States must help, and the president indicated that he would. And as I said, the important thing was that the president went and comforted the people along with the First Lady of the United States, who also did an excellent job. Here is Melania Trump.
I'm here to put my support in, and for the children, for the families, and just to stay strong. And on the end, everything will work out and will be okay.
We have a great family tradition on this island. Families really helping each other.
It's very important. Family, it's very important to, you know, for everybody. And I know in Puerto Rico as well.
I'm so happy that you're here. Thank you.
Thank you.
You made a great impression. The vast majority of people received them well as we drove them in the motorcade to the various neighborhoods where he was comforting, you know, just ordinary people who had suffered catastrophic damage. The people had signs up, "Make Puerto Rico Great Again." You know, it really was, "Thank you for coming, Mr. Trump." It really was, I would say, in the high 90%, a wonderful, wonderful reception. And any account that you read that diverts from the truth I just gave you is fake news. And I just want to give you two quick examples. President Trump was blamed for, in his alleged negligence in Puerto Rico, ignoring the outbreak of a cholera epidemic by no less than the Nobel Prize-winning economist Paul Krugman in the New York Times. A cholera epidemic. There is no cholera in Puerto Rico. That was a tweet that stayed up there, was only deleted days after it was debunked. Time magazine wrote, characterizing what the president of the United States said at his big press conference, that the president was saying, "Oh, you had no kind of storm here compared to Katrina. This is nothing." He did not say that. What he said was, Puerto Rico had, the official death count at that time was 16 dead, as compared to Katrina, which was 1,800 dead. That's what the president was saying. This was a rougher storm, than Katrina, but we had far fewer 100th the casualties. And to characterize it that he was saying, this is not, is so false. And I understand his frustration. We had a long talk about it on board Air Force One.
I'll just say this, Geraldo. It seems like every few days we're watching, like we just did, a split screen, interviewing you or interviewing someone that's at some of these sites where the hurricanes have hit, whether it's Maria or Irma or Harvey. And now he's heading to Las Vegas. So we continuously see him out there among the people.
Right. Geraldo, lastly, Kurt Schilling says the president, we only have 20 seconds, but the president hasn't been shown how bad it actually is, and the death toll could climb rapidly unless the aid gets quickly in the next 2 or 3 days. Real quick, 20 seconds.
Aid is important, but I think Kurt Schilling exaggerates the public safety issue. It is a compassion issue. It's an issue that we need to help because we want to help, and there is need.
Right.
It's not that there's a restive population that's going to
Geraldo, thank you for your hard work. The late night hosts are weighing in on this, on gun control, and we have Ben Shapiro right after the break to talk about that.
Don't go anywhere.
To the people of Las Vegas, I can't give you thoughts and prayers. I can only say that I'm sorry. I'm sorry that we live in a world where there are people who will put a gun before your lives.
And this guy reportedly had 10 of them in his room, apparently legally. At least some of them were there legally. Why is that allowed? I don't know why our so-called leaders continue to allow this to happen.
Come up with a better answer. Anything but nothing. Doing nothing is cowardice.
Those are the late night talk show hosts talking about gun control. We have Steve Doocy that's in Las Vegas live anchoring the show from out there. We also want to bring in Ben Shapiro. He's from thedailywire.com, a syndicated columnist and host of the Ben Shapiro Show, to talk about this very issue with the late night hosts.
Steve, you have a question for Ben?
Absolutely. Ben, I got a question for you. You know, many, as we just saw the late night host talking about how there needs to be more gun control. But when you look at what they found in the car of this guy, that ammonium nitrate, you just add the fuel oil to it, and you've got an Oklahoma City bomb there as well. What gun control law would have stopped that guy from doing what he did back there?
I mean, even the guns that he was using, I'm not sure that there's any evidence that gun control would have done anything. I mean, he obtained apparently these weapons legally. He had gone through federal background checks. There's no evidence of significant mental illness to this point. So all this seems like is people shouting, do something, while they have no particular solutions and no expertise on guns or gun control. I mean, the suggestion that gun control is going to put an end to incidents like this, again, that is an evidenceless proposition based on nothing but emotional response.
I was looking at Jimmy Kimmel last night, and he said, well, for those of you on television all day that tell me not to talk about gun control, my First Amendment is just as important as your Second Amendment. Ben, what's your reaction to that?
Well, I mean, no one is talking about stopping him from talking. I mean, I would never try to ban Jimmy Kimmel from talking on television. He should stop trying to ban me from owning a firearm. And again, nothing that the late night hosts are saying has any sort of relationship to reality. If they want to call for an outright gun ban, if they want to call for all guns in the United States to be removed, then we can at least get an honest assessment of what it is they believe. But when they say things like a little bit of common sense gun control would stop all of this, that's just a chimera. It's not true. They're making things up because this is all about the moral disapproval of people who own guns. And that's what drips from a lot of these folks, is this idea that if you oppose them on policy, it's because you don't care enough about what happened in Las Vegas. And that really is, that's quite disgusting. I mean, the idea that if we disagree on politics, it's because my heart isn't big enough, but your heart is just big enough so you understand Jimmy Kimmel or Stephen Colbert or Seth Meyers. You understand truly what America needs because you care so much. That's pretty nasty stuff.
So what is the issue here? What do we need to be talking about?
Well, I mean, I think we don't have enough information yet to know what sort of policy proposals would be on the table. This is one of the things that drives me nuts about this. Mass shootings are actually a pretty terrible way of determining policy because the sample size is so low, because it tends to be non-representative of deaths involving guns in the United States overall, for a variety of reasons. I mean, if we actually want to talk about gun violence across the United States, we'd actually have to start talking about, if you're going to talk gun control, then let's talk about democratic areas in major cities, because that's where virtually all of the murder, or at least a huge percentage of the murder, is taking place in the United States. Even that, though, would be, I think, a false premise, because the fact is that The number of guns in the United States has gone up as the murder rate has gone down. Per capita, there are now 1.45 guns per American in the United States. There were less than 1 gun per American in the United States in 1993, and the murder rate has declined markedly since that time. So the idea that more guns equals more crime or more guns invariably equals more mass shooting, the evidence is really weak on this stuff.
Yeah, so what does that tell you? Does that tell you that more people owning guns with murder rates going down? Is it because we feel like using a gun we can protect ourselves more, owning a gun?
Well, I mean, I think there's a case to be made for that. The truth is that correlation in these cases doesn't always equal causation. So saying more guns, less crime, it may be just as wrong as saying less guns, more crime. But by the same token, to suggest that if we just remove guns, that's going to send the crime rate down, it's not true. People keep talking about things like Australia, where there was a big gun buyback. And the fact is that in Australia, they only removed 1/3 to 1/5 of guns. The gun crime rate was declining markedly before that, and the United States is not the same as Australia. Try going to Texas and telling everybody they need to hand their guns over to the federal government and see how the gun rate, the gun death rate goes up.
I also tell the people in England how safe they are when they've had 5 attacks over the last year, and they have very few guns over there, as well as France.
Even law enforcement doesn't carry guns, right?
As well as Spain. True, good point, Ainsley. And finally, I didn't know. I'm not a gun guy. I don't pretend to be. But now I'm finding about these bump fire stocks that allow a semi-automatic to be an automatic. And the fact is, according to the ATF, it was actually legal to do. Would you, as a pro-gun guy, entertain the fact that we get rid of some of that conversion?
Yeah, I think I would. I mean, the fact is that the machine guns have been illegal for sale since 1986 in the United States. Devices that can convert a semi-auto to fire like an auto, I think there's pretty widespread support for getting rid of some of these devices. That said, a bump stock is very easy to make yourself, to imitate. Firing a semi-auto at a high rate is not particularly difficult to train to do. So I think that we can do it. I wouldn't use it as this sort of this panacea. I don't think that you can use it as a cure-all. The idea that that would cure these problems. The vast majority of mass shootings have not taken place with automatic weapons or even semi-autos being fired like autos. They've been with semi-automatic rifles or mostly with handguns.
Okay. Ben Shapiro, thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much.
All right, Steve, stand by. We're going to take a short break. Coming up, Mr. Las Vegas has a powerful message for his city after the massacre. Jillian's interview with Wayne Newton is next.
The one thing that still angers me is that nobody can give a reason why this fruitcake did that.
We are live once again this morning here in Las Vegas, just a couple of blocks away from the Mandalay Bay. Jillian has been out here as well. Jillian, as you can see, the police tape's still up. They're processing the crime scene, but at the same time, there are a number of bodies. 3 days later, they still have not been able to identify. The town is still in shock, and it was nice that you were able to go out to the legendary Casa Shenandoah to talk to Mr. Las Vegas about the most profound crime event in the history of Las Vegas.
And you could tell when we were talking to him how shaken he was that this had happened. And you could almost tell that he hadn't quite processed everything yet. He said the show must go on, though. He said, look, we're here to entertain. We're here to be the outlet, the escape for these people who come here to get away, if just for a couple of days. But he did have a lot of harsh words for the gunman, but also some words of encouragement for the people of Las Vegas. Listen.
My first reactions were anger, obviously. As the investigations go on, we find out more and more, but the one thing that still angers me is that nobody can give a reason why this fruitcake did that. Your first reaction, again, is, will that define Las Vegas from this point on? And having thought it through, I don't believe it will. I know Las Vegas will recover from it. It's a terrible, terrible thing, and our sympathies and prayers go out to all the victims and those that are still fighting for their life. But we have survived other things in this town, and what happened Sunday night obviously could not have been nobody could even assume something like that would ever happen. For that lone fruitcake to define what Las Vegas is, I don't think will happen. I think that by committing suicide, he might have, in his own mind, escaped earth justice and the justice of the people, but I know that there's a seat waiting for him in hell. So he'll suffer a long time.
President Trump is coming to Las Vegas. Your thoughts on that?
My thought is I'm thrilled. I think he brings with him the attention of the world. And he coming here is showing people that this is a great city and they're great people.